for allowing me to steal his podium mid-sentence, and thank you to my colleague, the member for Cunningham, for allowing me to step in ahead of her on the list. Deputy Speaker, I also rise to speak on the appropriation bills today before us in the House, and in doing so I want to address where this budget fails to deliver on fairness and a fair go to the people I represent in the federal seat of Calwell. Deputy Speaker, my constituents are very much the everyday Australians. They're workers, they're families, students, they're pensioners, they're young people, they're refugees. In fact, a large number of them are refugees, whereas we are receiving a huge number of the 12,000 extra places that have come in from Syria. My constituents are also people with disabilities, and they are, by and large, people from a culturally and linguistically diverse background and a very diverse socio-economic background. Many of them have worked and continue to work in the low-skilled area, manufacturing, although that is now a vanishing job area. I do have highly skilled people. I have employed people. I have a large number of underemployed people, and there are self-employed and, of course, a large number of unemployed. They are, by and large, resilient and very hard-working Australians, and they were looking for a fair go in this budget, and it's the budget that the Treasurer has termed as a fair budget for a time when things are looking up. Deputy Speaker, so they were hoping for some fair measures that might be of assistance to them in the way in which they get through their daily lives. Deputy Speaker, a fair go generally means giving everyone real and equal opportunity and resources to have a go and to make the best of what they can. It means paying taxes and making contributions to budgets according to each person's capacity to do so. It also means paying your fair share. So if you're a corporate or big business, and it certainly doesn't mean ordinary households and workers doing the heavy lifting of budget repair by paying higher taxes, as of course, and I'm pleased to higher taxes as company taxes and wages decline and sag. And I'm glad to see in recent commentary in the media in the last couple of days, the so-called top budget experts are actually making that point, and they're making it very loudly. Deputy Speaker, the budget across-the-board tax increase to fund Medicare and the NDIS and its $65 billion corporate tax cuts at the expense of cuts to education through its $22 billion cut to schools, hikes in university fees and cuts to TAFE and apprenticeships is hardly a vote of confidence in enabling opportunity for the ordinary people in my electorate. By choosing to deliver to big business and choosing multinationals at the expense of middle and working class Australians, and the risky assumption that company taxes will translate into jobs growth and wages growth. And this does show that the government is putting its eggs in one basket and therefore failing, I think, to secure better days for all the people in my electorate and for ordinary Australians generally. Now, Deputy Speaker, I've had a number of my constituents call me since the budget was delivered, and they've been obviously raising their concerns in relation to the budget. And I've also had the opportunity, like many of my other colleagues, to visit some of our public schools and indeed my Catholic schools as well in that short period between the budget and parliamentary sitting. And I think it's probably best to use some of their voices today here in this chamber to illustrate the frustration and disappointment of the people in my electorate to the budget. Now, Sam is a constituent. I've known him for a long time. He lives in Roxburgh Park, and he recently retired after 52 years of working in very labour-intensive jobs. He's been a fitter and turner, and most of his life has been spent on working on road constructions. He began work at the age of 14, not an unusual story for many of the people that I represent, and now he is looking very much forward to having a rest, as he put it to me, and to enjoy his retirement. He and I and many other people in this country feel that people like Sam have done their bit for the country, they've done their bit for the economy, they've done their bit for the budget, and it's now time for them to retire, to enjoy their senior years, and I think that we kind of owe him and others like him that right. Now, so that the thought that the government, and this is one of the first things he said to me, the thought that the government is still harbouring the idea of raising the pension age to 70, which, as we all know, and many have said before me, is the highest in the developed world, riles Sam and riles a lot of other people also, including myself. This type of manual labour that Sam has been involved in for 52 years does eventually take its toll on people. Physical work, it's the sort of physical work that is not found in corporate boardrooms and the sort of work captains of industry would never understand and they would never endure. So people like Sam, Deputy Speaker, after 52 years of work, are hardly in a state to be physically able to continue to do this sort of work until the age of 70. So the question is, what happens to people like Sam? The zombie measure on raising the age of retirement to 70 was introduced in the 2014 budget, and I remember the then Treasurer, Joe Hockey, said, and I quote, "What we are going to do is deliver a fairer system for the aged pensions that is going to focus on the sustainability of the system with a reasonable quality of life. The aged pension expenditure today is currently more than we spend on defence." Well, some people might argue that that's not a bad thing, that the fact that our aged pension spending exceeds that of our defence spending is a sign of a civilised society that is focused on and prioritises the care of its elderly, and in this case, its pensioners. Well, as I said, that's good and proper for the then Treasurer, Joe Hockey, to make that quote. But I want to quote our Shadow Minister, Jenny Macklin, when she says, and I quote, "How does Mr Turnbull expect construction workers, nurses and farmers to work until they're 70? He's completely out of touch," quote unquote. And the government's out of touch because it doesn't actually understand the type of work that these Australians are involved in, and it doesn't seem to care very much or have much of an affection for people being able to live quality retirement, like to retire and to have quality time with their family and to do the sorts of things that they didn't get a chance to do while they were working and doing their bit for the country. And so the real issue here is working to 70 might be okay for some in the future. I might, if I'm lucky, want to choose to work beyond that as well. But for people like Sam in my electorate, the ones that are physically unable to work because they've endured so much physical labour, what are the alternatives for them? And unfortunately, the government is silent on this. So are workers expected to end their so now prolonged, potentially working life to 70? Are they expected to end it on the unemployment benefits? Just ticking boxes at the job network providers? What kind of indignity is that for people who have worked most of their life? Sam can't imagine himself being able to work on the roads, and I want to say he asked me to say that until he was 70. And he can't imagine other fellow Australians doing hard yakka until the age of 70 either. So it's only a government that sees its citizens as cogs in wheels that can come up with this nasty policy. Only a government that doesn't really understand the value and the dignity of its citizens can come up with a plan to head off the availability of the aged pension to its citizens, while simultaneously it thinks nothing of handing over $65 billion of tax cuts to big business. Tax cuts that are actually coming out of those citizens' tax, the public purse, contributed to by the taxes of people like Sam. The budget is taking from the labour of middle and working class taxpayers and handing it to the corporate speculators, because it is speculative, the idea that company tax cuts will lead to jobs growth. And the truth is that I think most people that I speak to tend to think that this is going to be an opportunity for the corporates to actually increase their profit margins rather than to create jobs. And that's the view of the people out on the street. I think it's very important to make that point here today. Deputy Speaker, Sam, back to Sam, because Sam's very important. There are many Sams in my electorate. He won't forget that this budget has provided little help or interest in helping the automotive supply chain manufacturers successfully transition either. And my electorate, the federal seat of Calwell, is home to the now closed Ford factory plant. It was a Liberal government that ended car manufacturing in this country, and the so-called Growth Fund that was introduced, which was supposed to help the supply chain diversify, was always grossly underfunded, always. So there's no joy for people in that industry in this budget, because the top-up that was introduced in the 2017 budget for many has come, it's too little, too late. So our manufacturing firms struggle to remain competitive, Deputy Speaker, especially now in light of skyrocketing energy prices. And the budget has offered no immediate assistance for manufacturers who are under serious pressure as a result of this. And to this end, I want to speak about Willowware and the 200 employees at Willowware in my electorate. Willowware is a manufacturer in my electorate who has experienced the disinterest this government has in helping Australian manufacturers. It's a 130-year-old company founded by Ralph Willis Sr. And I think we're on to the third consecutive Ralph Wilson. Willowware has survived the Great Depression. It has survived the credit crunch, the global financial crisis. It's a company that during the world wars did its bit for Australia. And now that they need help, and they needed help, this iconic Australian company that, by the way, makes the esky, that's how iconic they are, now that they needed help, they're actually having to fight this government's war against manufacturing. Last year, Willowware was faced with a very real possibility of shutting its doors, ending a long family tradition of manufacturing Australian products, including the iconic esky, and leaving 200 local people in my electorate unemployed, leaving their families out in the cold. They faced the challenges from cheap overseas mass imports, with major outlets preferring the cheap plastic buckets as opposed to the quality Australian-made product. So in order to compete, they needed to transform and upgrade their machinery. They faced challenges with rising energy costs, and Willow is a company that also makes a car component for the Toyota motor car company. So they're part of the automotive parts supply chain, and which they received an award from Toyota last year. Willowware reached out to the Turnbull government and its ministers. They invited the Prime Minister to visit their factory in Tullamarine, and Mr Turnbull's office told the company he was unavailable. This is a company that's very close to the Prime Minister's political party, by the way. They wrote to the then Minister for Innovation, Christopher Pyne, in early 2016 for some assistance, and all they got was a letter from the Minister suggesting that they apply for a government grant that was already out of date. Approaches were made to then Minister Greg Hunt after the election and to the current Minister for Industry, all to no avail. As the local member, of course, I tried to help Willow. The Leader of the Opposition visited the factory. The Shadow Minister for Industry, Senator Kim Carr, and I have made a number of trips to the Willow factory in Tullamarine, and we have tried to be of assistance to them. The truth is that they came close to closing their doors not long ago, and if it had not been for the Andrews State Labor government to intervene and to assist Willow in order to make that transition, it was crucial transition and upgrading in order to be able to, as I said, compete against their cheap imports. I feel that our local electorate would have copped another 200 job losses as a result directly of a situation that exists in Australian manufacturing at the moment and is dependent largely on who's in government and what their attitude towards manufacturing is. So I'm pleased to say that we've been able to preserve Willowware, one of the last iconic Australian manufacturers in my electorate, and to, of course, protect their jobs. So, Deputy Speaker, the issue of manufacturing and jobs growth, and I don't have much time left, unfortunately, but I must say that the whole debate around penalty rates and working conditions and the incredible failure of the government to understand the needs of working men and women in the middle to lower class sectors of the economy has left me and a lot of other people absolutely dumbfounded. And the prospect or the idea that penalty rates are somehow a luxury that employers can't afford is so ludicrous. it needs an entire 15 minutes to explain. And on that note, I thank you, Deputy Speaker.